Take it away, Laszlo.
Right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Laszlo Shomi. I work in Teams Engineering, and today you're joining a session about new Teams transitions for GCC. In the background, I have a very capable team helping us. We'll answer your questions as we go along, and towards the Q&A session, we will come live and ask them live, and I will try to answer them live. So with that said, let's start kicking it off. We are talking about new Teams transitions for UC government customers. We're going to talk through a few important items in this session. We're going to start out around technical readiness, about Windows desktop client, Mac, web, VDI type of clients. I know a lot of organizations are not uniformly use one client, but have multiple different operating systems, method to reach Teams. We will talk about all of them. We're going to talk about migration approaches, known limitations as we develop the product and release it, and recent service updates before we're going to get to Q&A. During the session, please feel free to type in your questions, and my colleagues will try to answer you quickly. All right, new Teams technical readiness, our first main topic of the day. New Teams is a big deal, but switching isn't that big of a deal. It's a new client. The backend services align to the new client and the old client at the same time. All new improvements, we put in quite a bit of effort to rewrite the client from the ground up. This is the new client you're going to be using moving forward. First, there is a choice to evaluate the client. We give you the controls, how you can deploy the client in your organization and test drive it. It is the new toggle button, try the new Teams, and we will move that around as we move forward under the help system. And eventually, when new Teams will be the default client, that will be removed. You can stay informed by watching the in-product messaging and public updates. We have several avenues. I will link you them as we go along, but you can learn about the new Teams, all the new updates coming out. It's a rolling update, just like with any cloud services. You will see these updates showing up in the new Teams client. Share the excitement, communicating the benefit of Teams, try it with your lighthouse users within your organizations, and then everybody will be asking for it afterwards. Our internal teams been using the new Teams for a long time. I never switch back to the old Teams anymore. So once you start using it, I think you will be very satisfied with it. Okay, let's talk about the features which are changing. I'm not going to talk about every single one of them, but I'm going to highlight a few which we've been regularly being asked about. Highlight the notification piece, moving to the operating system. So that's the first item here. Teams handles, the current Teams handles notifications from the client point of view. In new Teams, this notification system is moving to the operating system. The operating system will be responsible for handling notifications. You have to make sure you allow that if you made any changes to these settings. Now, there is also the retirement around the wiki channel tab. That will be a two-step process for GCC customers. First, we will migrate over to OneNote as the meeting notes application. Wiki will go away because the new Teams client does not have Wiki enabled. It is just not a possibility there. Long term, once the loop component is available in GCC, that will be the final application for note-taking during the meeting and for other purposes. So we are waiting for Loop to be launched in GCC. In the meantime, the Notes app will be the OneNote, what you can use for note-taking during meetings. Okay. The deck will be made available at the end of it, and there are several links as we go along. Pay attention to those very useful items. So features that are changing. There are a lot of things we rewrote from the ground up, and aligning to those, One of them is the presence and notification piece, right? The first item again. Select a user avatar photo anywhere in Teams, and then you can quickly overview about that person. That will be parts of the upcoming People app, and you will be able to see that in the new Teams rather shortly. But that is changing. You are no more, you are not capable of subscribing to somebody's log on, log off events or present states anymore. This will be important moving forward as well. Other item I wanted to highlight here, features are changing at the search command box. So the following commands are no longer available. The / commands you used in the top search bar. We provide some enhancements as we move along, but these commands are not available in the new team. So if you used them previously, they are no longer available. With that said, when we reach the migration timeline of March 31st, when the client is generally available currently, there are a few items you need to be prepared for from the operating system or the technical readiness point of view. So US government clouds in preview mode since October 2023. This will move to the default client end of March in 2024. To get there, your operating system, we will cover PCs, Macs, everything around that in this deck here. There are some readiness items you need to take care of. First and foremost, let's pay attention to the operating system itself. This slide is specific for Windows. So Windows 10 is the minimum version or higher. This excludes Windows 10 LTSC. If you use that version of Windows, you need to migrate to a Windows version, which is supported by the new Teams client. There is a minimum update for the Windows Teams client itself, the classic Teams application. And it is important because this will allow you to switch back and forth between the new Teams client and the old Teams client as you test drive the application. We rely on WebView 2. It must be installed. If you use updates for the operating system itself, it will be installed properly. But if you use any sort of deployment method pushing out to the client of what they get, you will need to install WebView 2. This is the Chrome replacement equivalent we need to pay attention to. I'm going to skip the middle section for a second and then go around the settings. I mentioned the notification piece. It's moving to the operating system, so you need to make sure that the operating system is enabled for Teams notification. That's what you used to on the lower right corner of your main screen with all the pop-ups coming. And you can adjust those notifications in the Teams client itself, but the mechanism to display them, it's handled by the operating system. If you use any delivery optimization, make sure that the download mode 100 isn't supported for updating the Teams client. So any delivery optimization settings, follow the link on this slide. We give you great help about it. And last but not least, pay attention to your DLP antivirus settings for the new Teams. Most notably, the executable for the Teams client is changing from msteams.exe to ms-teams.exe. So make sure if you use any sort of inspection on these clients, it's excluded as parts of best practices from your virus scanning settings or any sort of deep inspection technology you may use. So coming back to the releases of the semi-annual and monthly release channels. So Office considerations, new Teams is not part of the bundle yet. We will moving to that direction. So the new Teams client is installed separately at this time. Stepping over to the macOS, it is in preview status currently, and it will be releasing soon. The migration timeline is still targeting to be available by March 31st. So operating system requirements, there is a minimum for that as well. Classic Teams app requirements that will allow you to move back and forth. There is a minimum requirements there. Notification settings, just like with the Windows operating system, you need to allow notifications to go through the operating system. There is also an additional settings with screen sharing on the macOS platform you need to pay attention to. Exclude virus and DLP, it applies to all operating system, of course. If you're inspecting executables on the operating system, you need to exclude the new teams from it, just like same guidance as we had with the classic teams. And make sure the client install permissions are set accordingly. On the Mac operating system, you need to be an administrator to install the new teams client. Make sure you pay attention to that as well. Moving on to VDI endpoints. A lot of organizations we've worked with use VDI for users, managing them, controlling what they do, how they access their line of business applications. VDI platform is a little bit more involved when it comes to the new teams. So first, there is an operating system requirements here. Note that Windows Server 2016 is not on this list. So if your VDI platform runs on Windows Server 2016, that will not be supported by the new Teams client. Okay, Windows Server 2019, 2022, or Windows 10 version itself or higher will be supported. Our VDI providers all support new teams. And moving forward, that is the new team supporting the VDI client as well as VDI 2.0 coming out in rather short order. Both together will allow the new Teams client to be used on VDI platform. Note the date that for migration to new Teams on VDI platform is moved out to June 30th timeline. Okay, so you have a little more time with your VDI implementation. There are some minimum requirements for provider installation and caches and profiles. Follow those links, pretty descriptive, what you need to do. Those steps will get you there. Minimum requirements for the Teams app. So it's a machine-wide installer for VDI platforms. You need to update to that minimum version. WebView 2, also a requirement, of course. No change in the Office packages. It's still the same requirements as before. And of course, it applies to GCC platforms that it's not parts of the Office package. Notification settings, delivery optimization, virus checking, all applies the same way, just like any other operating system. Okay. So preparing for new teams. Again, I talked about the Wiki deprecation migration to OneNote. If you used Wiki in your Teams channels construct, this is the piece worth retiring. Migrating to OneNote is the way to go, and you could do that anytime before that date. The new Teams client simply does not have the capability to connect to Wiki, so it must be need to migrate it to OneNote, or you can historically reach it on SharePoint or the classic Teams while it's still available. Okay, very important. If you have more questions about this, please pop in a chat message for the folks so we know and perhaps can help you along the way to get there. Preparing for new teams, another important item, meeting notes and interim migration to OneNote, right? Same as with Wiki, OneNote is the tool we use at the moment. Moving forward in meeting construct, once Loop launches, you will see that capability just like in the commercial tenant currently once it rolls out. Okay. And one last item I wanted to highlight here, which is changes to website tab within new Teams. So once you currently you can pin a website into a team and channel or into a conversation. That capability is changing. It's changing because we are no longer able to run these web pages in a sandbox environment. And that's important because we will have to pop it out into a web browser. So this is the approach the web browser are taking, that they don't allow sandboxing web page content into another client. And that's what the Teams client was essentially doing. Now, popping it out into an open web browser is still the option. It's provide absolutely value that you pin some web pages for users to use in a construct in a Teams channel, but it's no longer opening in Teams. It will pop out in the web browser. So pay attention to that, and be prepared for your users if they have any questions. This will begin rolling out in 1st of April. All right, we covered those prerequisites for the operating systems, Mac, Windows, VDI. We talked about some features which are changing now. Let's talk about the migration and how we get there, migrating policy-wise, how we give the toggle to the users, and those items. Let's talk through them really quickly. So policy management-wise, we use Teams Admin Center, of course, under Teams update policies. Under Global, you can add your own policies, of course. You will see the new Teams client options. Right now, you will see 4 items there: not enabled, classic Teams as default, Microsoft controls, new Teams as default. Now, there will be a new one coming pretty soon called the new Teams only. So let's talk a little more about this. You can control this in Teams Admin Center, as I mentioned, or in PowerShell. Both capabilities are available. Next few weeks, when we launch the new Teams only, that will be the final policy settings for the users. This will do a few things for the users. It will enforce that they use new Teams on the client. They will not be able to switch back. There is no toggle in the client anymore. And within about 2 to 7 days, we will uninstall the classic Teams client. Pay attention that it does not apply to machine-wide installer. It will only apply to the user context installer. So if you deployed the Teams client, Teams Classic client with a machine-wide installer, you will need to remove it using that same methodology. Okay. You can also assign these policies via group policy. You can this policy option gives you assign up to 64 groups with direct membership, or you can assign these policies to the users directly using PowerShell and using variables. All work perfectly fine. There is no right way or wrong way to do it. It depends on the size of your organizations and how familiar you are with the tools it's provided here. So you have more than one ways to get to your final destination of new Teams only. But what are these settings do? So use new Teams client not enabled. The user simply don't have a choice to test drive. The new Teams client is not available for them. Classic Teams as default. This will give the user the control to switch to the new Teams, but by default, they will use the classic Teams client. Inversely, new Teams as a default, they will use new Teams client as the default, but they are able to switch back to the classic Teams as needed. Microsoft controlled, that is the default currently, is Microsoft will drive your destination, and when the new Teams only settings available end of March, we will roll every tenant to that settings. So think of it this way. Anything else but the Microsoft controls, you control your destiny. When you leave it on Microsoft controls, we will control your destiny starting end of March. What is the client experience for your users? Okay. Both are acceptable. Generally, most IT administrators we talk to want to control their user experience and give them the capability to test drive the application and provide feedback as needed, make sure there are no blockers. If there are any blockers, you can deploy new Teams client. We want to hear about it, so we can talk to you and address those issues. But these are the settings. This is the way we move forward. New Teams only will be the only settings available for users past March. All right. Now let's talk about how you prepare for this new Teams client. Classic Teams end user migration experience, what we can do. So there are several settings areas which we migrate to the new Teams client. And we use the subset of these user settings will be migrated once when the user first runs the new Teams client. So if the user switches back and forth, then start making changes in classic Teams, once they switched over to new Teams as well, those changes will not migrate over to the new Teams. So this will only happen the first time when the user does this. Don't expect that going back to all classic Teams, you make a change, going back over to new Teams, those changes will transfer over. They will not. So chat density, how you view messages, how messages showing up, what the default languages are, animations turned on or off, all these will migrate when first time you launch the new Teams, as well as devices and preference and how those are set up. Files, links, default locations, custom background images. We will try to add to this list as we move forward, but that in current state, these are the items what will migrate over to the new Teams. Pretty simple. Keep in mind it will only happen once when the first time the user launches the new Teams client. And after that, they can adjust whatever settings they need to. But if they go back and forth, they need to set it on both clients. So preparing for new Teams. We talked about the policy pieces on the right side here, the new policy settings with the new Teams only. But first, we need to get the new Teams application to the desktop for the users. So classic Teams is the normal Windows app. The new native Windows application is the new Teams client. It uses the MSIX package for interoperability with other Microsoft software. It will also give you great advantages in the upgrade settings. I will talk about those in a second. So MSIX is the new installer format. It will install the client and updates the client after the user logged on the first time. It will take care of that both in machine-wide installer and user context installer. But first and foremost, how you deploy this application. You can simply download the exe for the installer, and it will install the client that way. Works as always. There is no issues around that. User have to take an action to go and download the installer, or you can push it out with whatever distribution technology you use for your clients. Teams bootstrapper.exe is the way you can deploy it from a script point of view, logon script, PowerShell script, GPO, whatever you may use for this deployment. Deployment, new Teams across your organization. Again, Intune, Endpoint Configuration Manager, Group Policy, PowerShell, any distribution method is a fair way to deploy it. For 64-bit operating systems, we will update the client to 64-bit client. We will do that when the users start using the client, and pay attention that we align to the operating system. So when the first time you run the client, we will create a background task which will handle the client updates, both in machine-wide and user context install. It doesn't matter how that client is installed moving forward. We have this version control in the client that, or a multi-use machine, for example, when user is installed Teams in a user context, there could be a different things for the different profiles. With the new Teams client, we handle that centrally. There only gonna be one Teams version on that machine because this MSIX installer and how it works. Okay, that's a great way to deploy the client in all these options. Now we need to set the policy. Users control their own destiny. You control what their default experience is, or when the date comes, Microsoft will control it for you, moving to the new Teams only settings. All these together provides the capability for the user to switch back and forth a deployed client. You can pre-stage the client for the users before you set the policy settings. All fair games. If you just set the policy, then switching over, we will get the new client and install it as well for the users. Right. Let's talk about the new teams and its known limitation. This is a new client from the ground up, and we had some items we changed along the way. And there are other enhancements coming after the launch of the client. Please note the link on the new teams known limitation page. I will link it towards the end, or I can ask some of my colleagues to put it into the announcement, so you will see it right away what those items are. I'm not going to drain this list extensively, but I'm going to highlight a few items. First and foremost, around Teams live event to town hall experience as we change it, how we organize those. Currently, with the new Teams launching, the Teams town hall organization experience, organizer controls, have a dependency on the classic Teams client. So the organizer need to run the classic Teams client. That will be changing shortly, but at the moment, I want to prepare you, if you use town hall experiences, when scheduling the live event, it will redirect to the classic Teams or the web experience currently. By late March, we plan to run a direct town hall scheduling experience in the new Teams client. Very important. Some of our customers got surprised by this, so we warn you ahead of a time. All right. Link to the list. So let's talk about recent service updates. As I mentioned, the new Teams client is continuously being updated. There is a new release roughly every 2 to 4 weeks. You will experience for your users. Your client will auto update to that version. Currently in the release cycle, a real-time presence, spell check, intra-group naming policy support, message sync status, enhanced calling and meeting notifications, all in the release state. That's what's rolling out currently to the client. Now, we're planning to release more, of course, in the coming cycles. We talk internally as a sprint. So the next sprint will produce these released items in the new Teams client. We, of course, moving along and provide enhancements. That's why we deployed or created the new Teams client, that we can innovate moving forward only on that one client. Planned towards March 2024, when new Teams web client support will be rolled out and image support for announcements. Also monitor the release cycle pages, what we published. Very important. We give you notifications what is coming. We have technical programs. You can test drive those features under tab Technical Adoption Program. For some of them, it gives you the opportunity to align it to your business and how those important updates are rolling out for you. All right. This seems like a very short presentation. I don't want you to be afraid of the new Teams client. It is a new client for the same backend system what you've been used to. We give you the capability to control your destiny for your users. We talked about how we deploy it, talked about the prerequisites on the operating system side of things, what you need to do in a generally updated system. Any of these items I talked about today is a non-issue. Your operating system is generally updated. Your Teams client is updating itself. You apply the policy for the users and moving forward from there. So I would encourage you to test drive it, enable the policy for the users for the toggle, and handle with your support services any fallout might happen from the users. Something is not working, we want to know about, and we want to help you. We want to help you get there. A few links before the Q&A starts here for the technical readiness piece, overview of the new Teams client in Teams, and the end user adoption readiness. We provided quite a bit of content around the new Teams client, AKMS new Teams. Please do visit and ask questions. Folks on the line, for my fellow presenters, any questions we can answer?
Yes. Can you hear me, Laszlo?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Hey, there were a couple questions. The first one, I'll just go down the list. I saw a deprecation of the wiki that suggests that the suggestion was to use notes. Does Microsoft intend for meeting notes to replace the wiki, or is this a stopgap until something else is created?
Well, the final destination will be the loop component within meetings. What we're gonna use, and it's a portable component. You can reference it in emails. You can reference in SharePoint sites. That loop component doesn't exist in GCC tenants yet. We are getting there. In the meantime, OneNote would be the replacement for Wiki to use it in for note-taking purposes.
Got it. And then we have a few questions. So there's one that Dave actually responded to. There's one that says, what is the size of the client being deployed? And then from our side, it's about 125 megabytes based on the initial install.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We'd like more details, including screenshots, if possible, about the user experience on March 31st when new Teams is pushed to the entire enterprise. Will users who are in Classic Teams get a notification that they need to update and refresh? Will the push happen at the same time across the enterprise? For this customer, they have approximately 70,000 users around the world. What happens if users are in a meeting in Classic Teams when the push occurs?
It will not interrupt the meeting. So it's not, you get the policy and immediately the client drops and reboots in new Teams. That's not the experience. It will be a gradual rolling out experience. So we state the date, it's March 31st. It doesn't mean that 1st of April, everybody come up in new Teams. It will gradually enable the policy. Your client checks in for new policies regularly. If the client is idle, it will check for are there any updates, and it will update itself to that new experience based on the policy applied to them, that new Teams only policy I showed about. So it is not immediate as soon as the policy gets to the user. It is not all users at the same time. So your 70,000 users mentioned here is not all of them going to update at the same time. But within, I would say, a week time frame, all the clients will update to the new Teams experience. With that said, give them the opportunity to toggle it themselves ahead of time. That would be my advice. Not let all users get the new experience at the same time.
So you're saying to do like a phase rollout as of
yeah, it's not even a rollout. It's an opportunity for the user to toggle their experience. Oh, new Teams client, let's try it. Just like you see it in new Outlook client experience. You may have experience depending on what ring you are. You try it out, you like it, you just stay there. And then March 31st will be a non-event to you. For your power users, that toggle is really powerful. They want to play with things. First thing I did, I switched my client to it. And then I spent more and more time in it. I don't remember the last time I went back to Classic Teams.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Laszlo.
Mm-hmm.
We identified this feature in new Teams as missing spell check. Do we have a timeline when it will be available? And I think you covered this.
I didn't cover spell check. It was one of the slides. It is coming. I don't have a date on it yet. I can try to look it up really quickly. But I don't want to multitask here. Oh, okay.
I think Dave had a response to this one.
Yeah, I believe you mentioned that it was rolling out. It was in the current rollout, but some people were saying they received it and it currently and it seems broken. What I would recommend to anyone that's receiving new features is if you feel like it's not right and you feel like you got something new, please, 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 please open a ticket and ask your support team to raise the severity so that way we can address it immediately. Our intention is to roll out features working perfectly. If they're not, we need to go back and figure out what's wrong, and we need your help to do that. Thank you.
Right. Christian said a few very important items here. One is open a support ticket. New Teams client is a released product, is not a beta product. It's not in preview, exception of the Mac, of course. It is a released product. So you can use your regular support channels to open support cases about it. Raising severity on a case, it's an internal process. When from the support system, it comes to engineering. If there is any issues, we notice we want to be able to fix it, not just for you, but everybody else who's using the systems worldwide. So that process is how us engineering get to know about a particular problem. If nobody complains, then it's not a problem. Then we don't even know about it. So support cases, ask your support case handler to escalate the case to engineering. That's the process how we learn about there is something wrong, or there is a blocker, or there is a scenario we didn't think of, and we need to address. Very important process. Thanks, Christian. Rocky?
Perfect. There will be a couple. Okay, is there a time frame on the fix to create a team in new teams? We were informed it's a known issue, but I have not heard any updates. And then the response from Dave is that this issue has been resolved.
Right,
If you're still seeing an issue, please raise a support case with Microsoft for further assistance.
Yep.
Will the deployment options approaches of Microsoft managed tenant or internal deployment be covered on this call? Yes, I believe we covered that.
Yes.
When will live events be available in the new teams?
The town hall experience, it's available today with the exception of the organizer experience. Town hall is the direction we're going, and that is parts of the new teams already, again, with the exception of the organizer experience.
When new teams for Mac goes GA, will the name of the app change from Microsoft Teams, Work, or School?
I don't think that naming change will occur. It is a new Teams client for work or school experiences. I think the name will remain the same.
For VDI, is Windows 11 supported? And then
as the operating system?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Dave responded, yes, please refer to the following URL, and I'll paste that for the user that was asking for it. And then there's a couple of them for VDI. I'll just go through it, Laszlo.
Sure.
For VDI, you have listed both 1.6. So there's two different annotations here, or later as needed for the new Teams client. Can you clarify which, please? For VDI, it'll be 1.6.00.4472 or newer, and I will paste the link for a reference. Then there were a couple other ones. I don't know if we're going to cover this one. Is there going to be new teams for web? We've seen new channels experience on web. Yeah, okay. So there will be a new teams for web.
That is new teams for web. I mentioned the release date of it. Give me a second. I will go back in my slides.
Hey, Laszlo, while you're doing that, one correction I wanted to make is in Town Hall for GCC customers, it's not there yet, but we expect it within the next month or so. Okay, well in advance of the March 31st date.
Thanks, Christian.
Sure.
New Teams web client support planned for March 2024.
When is so in the toggle for Teams update policy, when is new Teams only going to become available? It just said coming soon. I don't know if there's any other date that we can provide.
In the next 2-3 weeks, I was told, when that setting is coming. In the meantime, you can set the policy to new Teams by default, but it still gives the users the toggle that they can switch back to classic Teams. but they will launch new teams as their default experience.
There's a few questions for uninstall. What is the recommendation to remove the old Teams client once we convert to the new Teams client?
So the question relates to the classic Teams client and how it was installed. If it was a machine-wide installer, I mean, you pushed it out with some distribution technology as a machine-wide installer, you need to manually uninstall that using your distribution methodology to uninstall that Teams client. If it was the user context installed classic Teams client, once new Teams is the default after the March deadline, within about a week, we will uninstall the classic Teams client automatically. You don't need to do anything.
Another question related to uninstall. Does Microsoft have a script to help uninstall the classic Teams machine-wide installer?
I think it's documented, our public documentation. I need to pull that up.
Okay, and then once we get that, we'll be able to paste that
Yep.
in the chat. Perfect. When will Designer become available for government users, since formatting of Teams announcements appear to depend heavily upon that addition?
I don't have a date, Dave. Did you know? Do you know that rollout date for Designer?
Yeah, thanks, Laszlo. The confirmed date for Designer is still being finalized, but part of that, there will be an update for new teams for GCC specifically around the March timeframe, where you'll have the existing experience where you can use a normal image interim instead. So until that's in place, if you do create an announcement through new teams, you will have the option to attach an image, but note that that is soon forthcoming. And then extended past that, that's where the designer experience will.
Another question, will the old client be removed when installing the new client?
Not automatically and not immediately. I mentioned it will take 2 to 7 days once the policy changes to new teams by default and the new teams only. In the user context install, we will uninstall it in 2 to 7 days.
Can the default be set by GPO, or is the GPO option only for the deployment?
The policy deployment is what you can deploy with a GPO. So you create the policy, you create a new policy for your organization's, let's say, IT department. So you create a new IT department policy, set the settings to new teams as default. How you deploy, how you assign that IT policy to your IT users is the thing you control with a group policy assignment. So you either set a group policy assignment, you have direct membership to groups, you assign that policy to that group, and the users will get the policy that way. If you have another attribute within AD or Entra, you can write a PowerShell script to say if that feature attribute set to IT, apply this policy to the user directly. So either you apply the policy directly to a user, or you use group policy assignment to assign a policy to a set of users that way.
Thank you, Laszlo. There has been a problem uninstalling Teams Classic, which removes the ability to create Teams meetings from within Outlook. Has that issue been addressed? Currently, if we uninstall Teams Classic, it removes the Outlook add-in for Teams, breaking the created Teams meeting functionality in Outlook.
Okay, a few quick thoughts on that. First of all, make sure that the new Teams client is the default application for Office applications. Make sure that is there. It is open a support case about it. If there is a wider issue, we wanna know about it. We had some Outlook add-in issues in the past. I believe they are all fixed, and no customer of mine have experienced them recently.
Got it. Thank you. After March 31st, everyone will be on the new Teams client, right? And cannot switch back. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. That's what the policy does. It enforces the minimum client requirement getting to sign into new Teams. That means if you try with the classic Teams client, because you still had a machine-wide installer, you will not be able to sign in with it. You will be switched to the new Teams client. By default, that is the client you will need to use.
Will the new Teams toggle work the same on Mac as it does in Windows?
Yes.
Perfect. So if the Teams update policy is currently set to not enabled, how would the timelines impact this? And would this policy get changed with no admin action?
When the date comes and you have not enabled it, we will switch it to the new Teams only policy. Eventually, those other policy settings will go away when there is only the new Teams client available for the service to connect with. We're targeting this to be the end of March date. VDI, we talked about the end of June date, but eventually that policy settings for upgrade will only have the new Teams only as the default client for everybody.
Thanks, Laszlo. Regarding
just a sec, Rocky. So think of it, you controlling your destiny until March 31st. Not enabled, classic default, new Teams default. It gives you a playground of higher users experiencing the new client and can test drive it or not. Some users you may don't want to bother until you tested the new client out. Great, understand that stands. But the 31st date, March 31st date, is a set date to move to the new Teams only policy. And then rolling out from there to the new Teams client. So setting it to not enabled, it controls the capability the user have until the March 31st date. I hope it makes sense that way. Sorry, Rocky, go ahead.
Yeah, you're good. And then also for clarification, that came in from Dave regarding the creating a Teams meeting in Outlook. For the meeting add-in issue with Classic Teams, this is being addressed and should be resolved pending a future update. There was a question on when Mac users would start seeing the new Teams toggle.
The client is in preview mode right now, so they could see the toggle, but assuming the client is installed, of course, which requires admin privileges on macOS, it will be in full release mode in the next few weeks.
Got it. There have been a couple questions specifically around custom backgrounds. Where do custom backgrounds reside?
Client side, you will see your custom backgrounds. I can find it quickly. Played with this before.
I can play the Jeopardy music while you're looking for it.
But thank you. It always helps. But yeah, custom backgrounds stored locally on the machine. It's one of the cached items specific to the user settings where it resides.
Okay. And then there have been a few questions asking about the support process. So let's say that the customer is having issues, and then submitting tickets, according to them, is very time-consuming, tedious, or it's taking a long time. Is there an expedited way specifically for new teams?
Same support process, but ask for the severity to be higher. So there are several levels of severity. They will ask you when you open a support ticket, what is the severity of this case? Raise it up higher and ask them to escalate to engineering. If it's a not a known issue, they can answer you immediately. Escalate it to engineering They know the process, but and you will be asked again on the beginning when you open a support case, what is the severity of this case?
There have been a few questions that have asked specifically for iOS. Is new Teams going to be available for mobile devices?
No, new Teams is not on mobile devices at this time. That's a separate update path. It will have a similar new experience, but it's not what we call the new Teams client currently. So we're focusing on desktop operating systems and the web operating systems. Android and iOS platform, they have their own client release date specific to that operating system. Continuously improved just as everything else.
Okay. In regards to reporting, is there any reporting that helps us understand who has received the toggle, chosen to flip it, and currently using it?
Yes, there will be a reporting in the Teams admin center around new Teams client and how users are use it. Currently, it is not available. You will know the policy you assign it to your users based on that assignment of who has the toggle, who used the toggle will be parts of this reporting in Teams admin center. It's also coming in the coming weeks.
Perfect. And then on new Teams, a customer is seeing apps that are not on their approved list. Where users can request it from the apps in Teams? Can we suppress the apps that are not on the approved list from being advertised and to show only the approved software in Teams? It's similar to what they had in Teams Classic.
That is not a new Teams client question, I feel. It is parts of the application management and how it's available available in GCC tenants. Let's take that question and follow up separately, I would say.
Okay.
Rocky.
Got it. I'm trying to comb through it all.
Thank you. I don't see it, so I rely on you.
I know. I'm trying. And then you addressed when Town Hall will be available for GCC, correct?
Yep, we talked about that.
Okay. So this is around the install. What about all user contexts? If a user doesn't log into a machine often but has an old version installed of classic Teams, does a new team scan all user profiles to delete them all?
It will delete in the user context where the user is running it on. It will not scan the other profiles. I haven't tested that personally, but I'd expect that behavior. It should not modify other user profiles because that client was installed in the user context. Machine-wide installer and the new Teams client MSIX installer will install. So the update will apply to others. When those other profiles log on, they will use that same MSIX installer, as everybody else. But the local profile install of classic Teams, it is specific to that user who logged on. So an old profile, which is not being used anymore, will not get Teams client removed automatically because we uninstalled that. That would be my expected behavior, but I have not tested this.
Around the Teams update policy, with the new Teams only policy, classic Teams can remain on a user's machine for 2 to 7 days before uninstall? And that's a question.
Yeah, in the when classic Teams client was installed in the user context, within 2 to 7 days, we will remove it after the new policy applies to that user. Yes.
Is Microsoft planning to come up with another new Teams client in the future?
You mean new Teams?
New Teams.
I think the answer to that is of course. It's a cloud service which we continuously innovate as we innovate on Microsoft Office, all together in M365. You get new version on the backend capabilities and on the client side. There will be new capabilities introduced to the new Teams client. Now, will there be another fundamental technology change like we did from classic Teams to new Teams? I have nothing on the roadmap at the moment, but I think as technology evolves, eventually, I am sure there will be a new Teams client, again, as the technology changed. For the moment, with the new Teams client, it's a new platform for the operating systems, and we are focusing on features in the new Teams client. So yes, there will be refreshes, as I mentioned, every 2 to 4 weeks, where we introduce new features, capabilities, bug fixes, whatever. But a new platform for Teams client, there is not a roadmap item I am aware of. I hope that answered your question.
It does. There's been a couple questions related to how Microsoft controls the rollout of new Teams. When will Microsoft rollout of new Teams begin? I know it is targeted to finish March 31st, but when will it begin?
It starts March 31st. It starts March 31st. It is, I'm not aware of a timeline. We will start applying the policy just like we roll out features in for tenants gradually. It's not a flipping a switch and all tenants worldwide all of a sudden have a new Teams policy applied to them. It will be gradually over a period of time, but it will start March 31st.
Got it. If the classic Teams client is not on the latest version on March 31st, will the new client push fail? Will users lose access to the Teams client?
They will be forced to update at some point. I mean, if we fail to install the Teams client for whatever reason, there is a notification for the client. How old are we talking about here? I mean, the 1.6 and the version number afterwards. A good way to check versions for users is using your quality of experience Power BI report. There is a client version report which you see through your organizations of what users are running. It is also aligned to a user ID, and you can figure it out that way of what version they are running. Consequently, also the report what launching in Teams Admin Center will also give you indications of what versions users are running that way. That is coming in the next few weeks, as I mentioned. Anything else?
Then I have one more question. I know we're at time. There was a question around, can we speak more about how new Teams will integrate with third-party collaboration apps? There shouldn't be any change to the way that apps currently work inside of in classic Teams today versus new Teams. And then I believe we're at time.
Actually, Rocky, we have another half hour.
Oh, we do. Okay, perfect.
Yes, I extended it.
Okay.
Right. Any other question?
Yeah, is using a full tunnel VPN supported by Microsoft for Teams?
Supported, yes. Recommended, no. I mean, for quality purposes, it is not specific to new Teams or classic Teams. It is the statement for a cloud service handling real-time protocol, voice, video, desktop sharing. It is not recommended to double encrypt that traffic into a full VPN tunnel. You can use your quality of experience report to look at actual experience for your users, but it is not recommended. Split tunnel VPN is still the recommended approach for real-time protocol. This is not unique to Microsoft Teams. All other cloud solution providers in this space have exactly the same recommendation to use split tunnel for media traffic. Full encrypted VPN tunnels are not kind to real-time protocols, and you may experience problems with it, depending where the user is connecting from, what is the technology you're using. Do we have successful deployment of full VPN customers? Yes, we do. it is the recommended. It is absolutely not the recommended approach. So split tunnel VPN. You will be asked to replicate any particular problem you may call support services with over a split tunnel VPN. When we start seeing network items are not up to an optimal standard, what we recommend, and you calling about problems going over the VPN to replicate the issue over a split tunnel VPN or without any VPN. It's a cloud service. It's encrypted. It's encrypted bidirectionally. Now, putting that traffic into a VPN, it provides no additional value for you or your IT services. They can't inspect that traffic any further than they can already inspect it with any existing technology outside of the VPN. It is encrypted end to end, and therefore it provides no value for the real-time traffic, again, voice, video, desktop sharing to be inside another VPN tunnel or inside another encrypted channel for your users. You need extra equipment on your termination point when you're talking about the large organizations, and you can't do anything with the traffic. You will be bypassing it. So having a split tunnel VPN is important from that planning point of view. Also keep in mind, Teams clients have the intelligence to discover where in the world they are, assuming it's a split tunnel VPN, and connect to the closest Microsoft access points in region to get to that particular meeting or get to the service itself. We provide that worldwide network as parts of your licensing, and prevent the client from using it will cause quality problem long term. Okay.
Thank you. How is enterprise channel controlled for Teams updates?
You mean the Office update package?
That's what it sounds like.
New Teams client is not parts of it at the moment, so it's a separate install. We are working towards making it parts of that install. So that is the initial installer of the new Teams client. That's what we're talking about specifically. Update of the new Teams client is still through, as I described earlier, via that MSIX installer.
So this customer is a GCC tenant with 65,000 G5 users. Teams update policy, Microsoft controlled. With many remote sites with limited bandwidth, we want to limit the impact of downloads en masse. How does Microsoft controlled plan to impact large organizations? So if I change to new Teams policy, will all 65,000 start downloading at the same time?
Not at the same time. So there is, just like with any Microsoft updates, there is a staging and timing available for those users. With that said, control your own destiny. That is, you could push out the desktop client ahead of a time at user logon using any of the distribution technologies, using the Bootstrapper-P to pre-stage that desktop client. So the switching part does not trigger a download. The client is already there, and then once you update within and you leave to launch, the client updates automatically after a period of inactivity. So you can pre-stage the desktop client, and if you have bandwidth concerns, for sure. Or let the users download it themselves. Go ahead, Rocky. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. No, I was moving on to the next question.
Yeah, sure.
So there was a reference to our link, Teams Classic Client End of Availability. The article says users will see a banner saying unsupported Windows OS. Banner message will say Classic Teams won't be available for use after June 30th, 2024. Is this the ultimate last day Teams Classic will not work, and March 31st is when the rollout will start?
It depends where the user is logging in from. From Windows and Mac OS clients, March 31st onward is the date we are after. On VDI platform is the June 30th date. Drive. So it can happen that a client logs in from a VDI client still using the classic Teams, but when they log in from a desktop client, they use the new team.
So for desktop client, can we clarify on what the actual rollout will be? Because
March 31st.
Yeah, so that's March 31st is what will happen.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
There's a question regarding ADA compliance. Blind users use the / command a great deal. What is now their alternative keyboard operation schema?
There is no alternate. The / commands are coming to the new Teams client before it launches.
Okay. I'm going through. When will companion devices / better together be supported in new Teams?
We need more information on that question. Which is the actual device? What we're talking about? New Teams clients support the devices same way, my experience, as the classic team. So we need some more specifics on that question.
Okay. I'm hoping this is being phrased correctly. Under Teams Classic, you were unable to stop sending the notification emails of missed IMs on an organization-wide or tenant-wide basis. Is this something that will be available for new teams?
Yeah, notification settings perfectly available, just like it was with classic Teams. You can set it of how you prefer to be notified. I have it disabled. I don't get notifications via email, so I know it's available.
Okay. Are there any suggestions for delivery optimization settings and individual downloads and throttling settings?
The guidance for, I'm sure, Dave, where you provided the link, contains all the settings to deploy. It is not a big package, 100 megabytes or so. It's not a huge package to deploy. So not sure what other optimizations we're looking for here.
Okay. Does the Bootstrapper install update itself over time?
It does not update itself. Once the client logs on the first time, that's when the update tasks are created for the new Teams client, and then from that point forward, it will update.
Perfect. That's addressed. Will there be any way to get data about usage via PowerShell?
The new Teams usage, you mean?
Yes. Yes.
I assume once it comes to the new Teams client, there will be a PowerShell option as well. I can't confirm it at the moment. The current report we're targeting, it will be the Teams Admin Center, and PowerShell would come right around the same time. I have to check on that.
Okay.
And just a second on the new topic. So here is I put it in the presentation window, new Teams client usage report. Please share the link as an announcement as well, Dave, if you would. Example, in about 1 or 2 weeks, we announced this is coming, and it talks about the desktop client only. Gives you these attributes. Generally, these reports in the Teams Admin Center are exportable, so you could export it into a CSV or Excel file, and then do the changes after that, whatever you are after.
Cool. Will the new Teams change the positioning of where participants appear to others? That sounds like during a meeting. Currently, all video boxes appear in different spots for each participant in the meeting. Example, the person in the top left box will show a different person for each person in the meeting.
You can change the layout of where you want it, depending you enable chat or you don't have chat enabled, where video is displayed, who is focused on during the presentation. You can pin a spotlight somebody. You can change the gallery layout. So short answer is yes, but we need to know more about the specific scenario of what this person is asking.
Okay. Can you address the new repair reset options in apps and features? What do they do? We've been told reset clears the desktop cache. What does reset do? Should we advise users to use these options?
I would make sure that we know what the troubleshooting the user is trying to achieve. Why would they need to run clear the cache on the client, which you can also do by right-clicking on the Teams client on the lower right corner. There are some tools there. So we need to know the troubleshooting scenario. It is not a standard procedure to use the application center to reset the Teams client for whatever reason. I need to know more about the troubleshooting and why we're recommending that for a user to reset the cache on the client. I can tell you from personal experience, I done it maybe once in the past year or so for troubleshooting reasons. When I try to do a different scenario, make sure the cache is not involved in my testing, but that was the scenario I was using for. I need to see what the support case is. So before you clear the client cache, perhaps open a support case, make sure that is the recommended and best approach for the user. Don't affect the user and their daily workflow. That seems like a very drastic step to do without more troubleshooting.
Got it. Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned that it may take a week to deploy new teams across an organization. If a user cannot log in using Classic Teams client, how will that work? They still have part of their
Dave, or I think you mentioned the dialogue earlier that you need to get into the new Teams client from the user point of view. Keep in mind, if there is a scenario where the user is not able to download the new Teams client, the web experience is always there. And it's always an updated experience once new Teams client is launched, just as anything else. So desktop client is not the only way to get to your Teams experience. There is the web client as a backup, perhaps tell the users while that client is updating or downloading in that first experience, when somebody was out for a while, open a web page, go to portal.office.com, log in, all the applications, M365 or in your GCC tenant are there. You can consume Teams from that point of view. There is also the web applications, which has no relation to this update process specifically, and the users could use that while their client is updating after they return from a long vacation, perhaps.
Thanks, Laszlo. Does Microsoft anticipate a massive number of client downloads on March 31st?
It will be a continuous event and is no different than any other Windows update we handle on a daily basis for millions of users worldwide. So we feel prepared for that event. It is not a big download from the client point of view, not downloading the whole Office. You're downloading an installer, and that from that point of view, it will install the client. So we feel ready. If there is any concern, we will address them the fly.
In new Teams, where do default backgrounds reside? We do not
I think you had that question.
Yeah, for default backgrounds, because they don't want their users to see a screen of options and want their specific agency backgrounds at the top. And we can, if we need to send out a location, we can post that in the as an
Yeah,
announcement.
let's handle this as a follow-up item. Okay.
Yep, sounds good. Oh, we covered most of that. Give me a second. I'm going back up and down for this. So earlier we were talking about the repair reset, and then for this customer, they were piloting new teams and found that several users were getting an error message saying they did not have access to new teams client. Reset solved that problem.
Was the correct policy applied to those users in that scenario? I mean, were they able to toggle it if they would download the new Teams client? That would be the approach I would take to find out.
Got it. And we can follow that up with after the session also.
Yeah, if that is a support case, please send it our way. We can take a look at it from that point of view. It is, again, I can't emphasize it enough that support cases, if there are no support cases coming to engineering, we don't know about your problem. And think of it that way. You want us to know so we can fix it, anything happen. So don't struggle too long after you're doing some basic checking on for the user. Open a support case and let it go through its phases.
Got it. Will users need to be enabled in the tenant to use new teams? Can they just use the client by itself as a guest login?
No, they need to be enabled to log in. There is an authentication takes place when you use the new Teams client. You get invited to a meeting in another tenant or by another organization. You can consume that from the web client as a guest. But to launch Teams client and take advantage of what the capabilities, you need to be able to authenticate to a tenant and use all capabilities. Again, we need to know the exact scenario this relates to, but all M365 or GCC customers, it's you have to have a license assigned, the appropriate license for the capabilities you use in the client, and be checking those licenses at time of authentication.
Do we have a link? Can you provide a link to the documentation on how to configure the new Teams enterprise channel, semi-annual and monthly?
Sure, let's take that separately and we will provide.
Yep. Cool. Let's see. Nope, going through this. So for some users, they reference an MC post ending at 040 that beginning January 4th, try new Teams toggle will begin rolling out for GCC tenants set to Microsoft controlled as a Teams update policy. They have not seen the toggle rolling out yet, and according to the MC post on February 15th, new Teams will become the default client. Is this when will these policies allow the toggle to show up? And then has a rollout described in the MC
but
post.
But the new Teams only comes in the next few weeks. That's
okay.
The stated date. I don't have an update on that.
Okay. For Microsoft controlled update policy, if I deploy new teams.exe, can users use new teams without changing the tenant setting?
Say that question again. I'm sorry, I got confused for a second.
So under Microsoft, for the Teams update policy, if you use Microsoft controlled, if I deploy new Teams executable, can users use new teams without changing the tenant setting?
Oh, without, yeah, the question is, will the toggle show up? We will control that we will move the user to Teams only. but the toggle will not show up in that scenario, I believe. Dave, keep me honest here, but only in the two other scenarios when classic teams default, new teams default is when the toggle showed.
How do you reference the build version based on a client version? Mine shows you have Microsoft Teams version and it ends at 4844.
It's under the top right about Teams client. That's when the version numbers and the web version clients shows. It is based on a release schedule, and that's how you reference what the latest is. There is also we can provide the public page around the new Teams client or what is launching. You should look at your message center post, what is coming to your tenant. We also have some indications there usually of what is coming to your tenant at the time. These were the first places I would look at.
Got it. The new Teams client appeared to implement embedded client-side normalization rules. Will Microsoft release a KB on the embedded rules?
Phone number normalization rules, I assume the question is about. I would say we need more specifics on this specific question. I mean, the phone number normalization rules coming from server side, and it's based on the location assigned to the user, that what are the default phone number normalization rules. So we need clarifications on this question. Let's take it offline.
Got it. Those are the questions that I'm seeing in, unless there are new questions that will be coming in.
I want to show something really quickly. I logged into my test and
so let me just say, sorry, Laszlo, thank you. Thank you, Rocky. Last call for questions. In the absence of additional questions, we'll be wrapping up as soon as Laszlo finishes. Please continue, Laszlo.
All right. Just for notes, I logged into my test tenant really quickly. Health, message center, just filtered on the teams. These are all the items what coming to your tenant in short order. There is a date associated with them. There is a category associated with them. It's an application. It is team specific. Make sure you look at these. These are the notifications, admin impact, feature update. The tags are important as well. You can really quickly find out what's going on with teams in your tenant. You can also sync this information into a team and channel. It's also a good way so you don't have to come to the message center to look at this. Just wanted to highlight this capability just so you can better keep up on message center posts for your tenant. Bill, back to you.
Oh no, that's back to me. There's a couple other questions.
All right.
Is a rollout of new teams via Intune necessary if an update of the new teams will be pushed via Windows Update?
It is not.
Okay.
It depending on how you handle the initial push of the Teams client and generally how you manage applications in your organizations and in your environment. Generally speaking, if the user install in the user context, MSIX installer will automatically handle the rest of the updates there. And I mentioned more than once, once you go out to lunch or the client is idle for a while, it will take care of the updates at that time.
Customers were supposed to get a banner message for those in Teams Classic on February 1st. We have yet to see it. Did this not get deployed?
I don't know the answer to that. Dave, do you know?
Yeah, thanks, Laszlo. I believe the last we revised is that the banner won't apply for U.S. government cloud, so there should not be a banner forthcoming that end users will see. We've got some documentation updates that are forthcoming for further reference, but right now that's not expected.
And also a follow-up item from earlier around the background. The pre-stage backgrounds, that's a Teams premium feature for customers. So if the organization wants to control and pre-stage backgrounds for their users, that only certain backgrounds are available, that will be handled as parts of the Teams premium licensing, that capability and feature in Teams Admin Center.
Can we disable the startup at login for new teams specifically across all devices? We need to allow our VPN to start up before Teams attempts to sign in, so disabling the setting is needed.
Again, two thoughts. First, yes, you can disable auto startup parts of the settings. Two, split tunnel VPN is the way to go for cloud services, real-time protocols, as I mentioned earlier. But yeah, you can disable auto start. Your user need to remember to start it afterwards.
Oh.
Go ahead, Rocky.
No, the stream has ended actually. Bill, I think it automatically turned off.
That's right. I think that's fine.
Okay.
I will encourage people to do the additional setup. Let me stop recording.